On the morning of October 9th, 2019, a long-haul driver named Curtis A. Holloway pulled into a rest stop that doesn't exist, ordered a black coffee, and recorded 17 minutes and 40 seconds of dashcam footage in which the attendant answered 4 questions Curtis never spoke aloud. Curtis drove freight for Meridian bulk carriers, hauling dry goods on a fixed loop between 2 distribution centres along State Highway 41, a stretch of 2-lane blacktop he'd run 200 and some odd times. He knew the gas stations by their signage, the dead spots in the radio, the exact mile marker where the cell bars dropped to nothing. The cab smelled like old cigarettes the previous driver never quit, and the pine tree air freshener Curtis kept replacing in protest. The first thing that didn't fit was the time. According to the truck's onboard telematics, Curtis crossed mile marker 118 at 3:07 in the morning. The next ping placed him at marker 119 at 3:51, 44 minutes to travel 1 mile. Curtis told the regional safety coordinator he'd stopped to use a rest area on the east side of the highway. There is no rest area between markers 118 and 120. There never has been. The state transportation map shows a drainage culvert and nothing else. The footage is where it stops being a scheduling error. At 3:09, the dashcam shows Curtis turning into a lot under sodium lights, a low building with a sign reading Hallow Springs Travel Plaza, EST, 1961. No facility by that name was ever licensed in the state. The lot holds 4 other vehicles, none of them moved during the entire recording. None of them have license plates. Inside, an attendant in a grey uniform shirt stands behind the counter. The name tag reads Marguerite. Investigators with Meridian's insurer reviewed the audio 4 separate times to confirm what's on it. Curtis approaches. He does not speak. The attendant says, "It's the long way home tonight, isn't it, Curtis?" Curtis stops walking. On the footage, you can see his shoulders go still. The attendant continues, unprompted, answering questions in sequence. "Your mother's resting fine. The transmission'll hold to spring. And no, she never got the letter you sent." Curtis had not opened his mouth. The dashcam microphone, which is sensitive enough to register the hum of the cooler, records no question from him at any point. He buys a coffee. The receipt, recovered later from the cab floor, lists a transaction date of October 9th, and a printed line at the bottom reading, "Thank you for coming back." Curtis had never been there before. He left at 3:26 by the dashcam clock. The telematics logged his departure at 3:51, the missing 25 minutes simply absent from the record, as though the system declined to count them. The Hollow Springs plate's interior temperature, registered by the cab's climate sensor while the door was open, held at 51 degrees the entire stop. The outside air that night was 68. Curtis returned the following week with his brother-in-law, a county surveyor, and they drove the stretch between markers 118 and 120 at a crawl in full daylight. They found the culvert. They found long grass. They found a single concrete pad, roughly the dimensions of a building foundation, with no structure on it and no permit on file for its pouring. Curtis turned in his keys in November. He told the safety coordinator only that he didn't want the 41 loop anymore. And when she offered him a different route, he said he didn't want any route that ran at night. He moved 2 states east. He does not give interviews. The footage was archived in Meridian's incident system under case number 447-C and would have stayed there, except for one entry logged this past spring by a night dispatcher reviewing old files. The dispatcher noted that the 17-minute clip now runs 19 minutes. At the very end, after Curtis has gone, the camera lingers on the empty counter. The attendant leans toward the lens, the way you'd lean towards someone listening from very far away, and says, "Tell the next one we kept his coffee warm." Story 2. On the morning of August 9th, 2016, a 22-year-old named Devin R. Halloway told 7 of his friends he had found a cave full of gold off Marrow Hollow Road. 6 of them went with him to see it. The county search and rescue logs for Tillery County record that on August 12th, after a hiker reported voices coming from a hillside with no known cave on it, responders excavated a collapsed shaft and recovered 5 living people, all severely dehydrated. The official report lists the party as numbering 5. Halloway worked at a hardware store in the town of Easby and rode the same bike route most weekends, a packed dirt fire road that loops behind the Pendry Quarry and rejoins the highway near mile marker 11. He knew the road well. He told the responders he had ridden it perhaps 200 times. On the 9th, he stopped because his chain had slipped, and while crouched fixing it, he noticed a gap in the brush at the base of a limestone outcrop, a vertical slit about shoulder width across. He went in. He said the passage opened almost immediately into a chamber large enough that his phone light couldn't find the ceiling. He described piles of what looked like gold, not coins, he was specific, but rough nuggets and irregular slabs, heaped against formations he kept calling wrong-shaped, columns that bent at angles stone shouldn't hold. He didn't touch anything. He said the air smelled like a refrigerator that had been unplugged for a week. He left, rode to a party at his friend Casey M. Trahan's house on Linden Court, and told everyone. The following account is reconstructed from the survivors' statements, which agree on the major points and disagree on nearly everything else. 7 people drove out the next afternoon. Halloway found the gap in the brush without difficulty. The cave was there, but once inside he stopped because the chamber he remembered was not the chamber in front of him. The passage forked where it had not forked before. The gold was gone. The formations were there, the bent columns, but arranged differently as though the room had been turned over in the night and set back down. They went deeper to look for the gold. This is the part every survivor describes the same way, in nearly the same words, and it is the only thing they fully agree on. The way out was not where they had left it. A wall stood where the entrance had been. Solid limestone, dry, undisturbed, no seam. Trahan filmed it on her phone. The footage was recovered. It shows a flat rock face, and Halloway's voice saying, very evenly, "We came in through there." There is no opening. What happened over the next 2.5 days is difficult to time because at least 3 of the phones died and the rest stopped agreeing with each other. One survivor, Marcus D. Eilert, told investigators his phone clock jumped backward 4 hours twice. The passages, all 5 surviving witnesses insist, changed when no one was watching them. A tunnel they marked with a torn shirt would lead nowhere. The shirt would later be found down a different tunnel they were certain they had never entered. They began travelling in a tight cluster, refusing to let anyone walk behind. The argument started on what they believe was the second day. Old things. Trahan and a man named Pell had dated. That surfaced. Somebody was accused of hiding water. Somebody was accused of leading them in circles on purpose. Eilert said, and I am quoting his statement, "We stopped being scared of the cave. We started being scared of each other. That was the trick of it, I think." Here is the detail the report could not resolve. 7 people went in, 5 came out. The 2 unaccounted for are listed as Devin R. Halloway and a woman named Sarah K. Vance. But when investigators interviewed the 5 survivors separately, all 5 described the full group, the arguments, the rationing, the marking of tunnels, and not one of them mentioned Halloway or Vance at all. When shown the party photographs, each survivor identified 5 people, themselves. They did not recognize the other 2 faces. They could not explain why they had driven out to a cave none of them had heard about, or who had told them it was there. Search and rescue never relocated the shaft. The hillside was surveyed twice. There is no cavity in it. Casey M. Trahan moved out of state in 2017. The others stopped speaking to one another. Earlier this year, the Easby hardware store received a mailed time card, properly stamped badge number 441, for a Devin R. Halloway recording a full shift worked the week it arrived. He has not worked there since 2016. Story 3. "26 months after Caleb R. Mercer vanished from the parking lot of the Sunoco on Delmar Road, his brother received a photograph of him holding a newspaper dated 9 days earlier. A newspaper from a county 400 miles from where Caleb had last been seen, and the search for Caleb Mercer had officially been suspended for nearly a year. Jesse Mercer worked nights stocking the dry goods aisle at a Food Lion in Carlton, Ohio, the kind of job you take when you've decided to become a person nobody looks at twice. He'd done it for 3 years. The store smelled like floor wax and the slightly sweet rot of overripe bananas pulled from the bin, and he liked that nobody there knew what he used to be. Before. When he sold to half the kids off Route 11 and told himself it didn't reach anyone real. The photograph arrived in a plain envelope with no return address, postmarked Belhaven, a town Jesse had never been to. Inside was the photo and a single line printed, "He still asks about you." Jesse told the detective he assumed it was a cruel prank. He kept it in his glove box for 6 days before he drove anywhere with it. What follows is reconstructed from the reopened case file number 9471C and from Jesse's own statements. Some of it remains disputed. Caleb disappeared on the night of October 4th. The Sunoco camera caught him at 10:51 pumping gas. At 10:54, the frame is empty and his truck is still there. No struggle, no vehicle entering or leaving. Investigators noted at the time that the pump transaction completed normally. Caleb's card was charged for 11.2 gallons, a purchase that finished 40 seconds after. He was no longer on camera. The man who took him was Darrell A. Voss. This part Jesse pieced together himself from an obituary he should never have connected to anything. A kid named Owen Voss, dead at 19 of an overdose in 2016 in a town where Jesse had sold for one bad summer. Darrell was Owen's brother. Darrell had spent 4 years finding out who touched the supply chain that killed his brother, and he'd traced it to a name. The wrong brother. He took Caleb because Jesse had already disappeared into Carlton, and Darrell could not find a ghost. Here is where the case stops making sense. Darrell Voss was found dead in his own kitchen in March of last year, 8 months before that newspaper photo was taken. Cause of death listed as a fall. He had been alone, by every account. Whatever Darrell intended for Caleb, he hadn't kept him in any one place. The file shows Caleb's image surfacing across 3 states, always with a recent newspaper, always healthy, always moved, before anyone could close in. After Darrell died, the photographs kept coming. Someone has been keeping Caleb Mercer alive. Someone who knew where Darrell hid him. Someone who reads the case file. Jesse began receiving messages on a phone number he'd given to no one. They contained details that were never released. The 11.2 gallons, the 40-second discrepancy. The fact that Caleb, as a child, had a habit of counting ceiling tiles when he was afraid. The last message Jesse received, the one he showed the detective before he stopped cooperating entirely, read, "You keep talking to them about us." Caleb counted 91 tiles last night. He wanted you to know it's 9 more than the room before. No one had told anyone Caleb was being kept in rooms with ceiling tiles. Jesse Mercer left Carlton in the spring. The Food Lion held his locker for a month and then cleared it. The manager said the only thing inside was a photograph he didn't want to describe. The case remains open and unworked, assigned to a detective who has requested it be reassigned twice. Caleb has not been seen alive by any official, only photographed, only counted. The most recent photograph arrived 3 weeks ago. Caleb looks older, but, well, he's holding a sign, and the handwriting on it is not his. The sign gives a number, a count, 96, and beneath it, smaller, the words that ended the file. He's getting close. Tell whoever's listening to stop helping him. Story 4. Between the spring of 1996 and the autumn of 2016, a man named Harold E. Brennan recorded 63 cassette tapes documenting a figure he claimed stood at the tree line of his property every night at 3:11. And on 14 of those tapes, you can hear a second voice answer him. His children did not know any of this until the funeral was over. The Brennan place sat at the end of Coldwater Road, 11 miles outside Hartsfield County, a 40-acre parcel of scrub pine and wet bottomland that nobody had wanted when Harold bought it in 1991. The house smelled like pipe tobacco and wood stove ash. There was a coffee can of bent nails on every windowsill, the kind of place where the nearest streetlight is a memory and the dark comes in like water. 3 siblings came back for the clean-out. Dana R. Brennan, the oldest, a paralegal from 2 states away who hadn't spoken to her father in 9 years. Marcus, the middle, who had. And Lee, the youngest, who found the tapes. The first crack was the floor of the shed. Lee noticed one board sat a 1/4 inch proud of the others. Swollen, he assumed, from the damp. He stepped on it twice to seat it. It did not seat. When he pried it up to fix it properly, he found a milk crate wrapped in 2 contractor bags, and inside the crate, 63 cassettes, each labelled in their father's careful block print with a date and a single word. The word, on every tape, was the same: visitor. The following account is reconstructed from the tapes themselves, from a maintenance log Harold kept in a separate ledger, and from interviews the siblings later gave. Some details remain disputed. The early tapes are mundane to the point of tedium. Harold reports the weather. He reports deer. On the tape labelled October 9th, 1996, he notes, in the same tone he used for the deer, that a man had been standing at the edge of the south field for the better part of an hour and had not moved. Didn't wave back, Harold says. Figured a hunter. Figured wrong. By 1999, the entries have a structure. Every recording is made at night. Every recording references the figure. Harold begins logging the temperature, and here is the detail his children could not get past. Across 2 decades of tapes, on every night the figure appeared. The thermometer on his porch read 51 degrees. Summer. Winter. It did not vary. He wrote it down each time as if hoping one night it would. Marcus, who had visited often, told his sisters he had never once heard their father mention any of this. He'd have me out splitting wood till dark, Marcus said. Then he'd want me gone before 9, always before 9. I thought he just liked his quiet. The 14 tapes with the second voice are the ones the siblings could not finish in a single sitting. The voice does not whisper. It is conversational, patient, and it answers Harold's questions a half-second before he finishes asking them. On the tape dated March 3rd, 2004, Harold asks it what it wants. The voice says it is waiting for the children to come home. That tape was recorded 12 years before Harold died. Dana took the recordings to a man named Paul Okafor, an audio technician in the county seat who restored old answering machine messages for a living. He ran the 14 tapes through a noise reduction suite, expecting tape bleed. A second program recorded over the first, a stray radio signal. He found none of those. He found one voice and a second voice in the same room, the same air, the same faint hum of Harold's wood stove behind both. The second voice, he noted in his written assessment, presents acoustic characteristics consistent with a source approximately 4 feet from the microphone. Inside the house, across the table from a man who lived alone. Okafor returned the tapes by mail. He included a note. The note said he would prefer not to be contacted about them again, and that on the night he finished the analysis, his porch thermometer had read 51 degrees, and he wanted Dana to know he did not own a porch thermometer. The siblings did not stay to finish the clean-out. They locked the house, signed the property over to the county, and went home to 3 different cities. Dana stopped answering Marcus's calls. Lee moved twice in 1 year. In the spring of this year, the new Firewatch Tower on the Hartsfield Ridge logged a routine thermal sweep of the abandoned Brennan parcel. The image shows the house, cold and empty, exactly as it was left. It also shows a single warm figure standing at the south tree line. The timestamp reads 3:11 in the morning. The recorded ground temperature that night was 51 degrees, and the parcel, according to the county, has no occupant. Story 5. Between 1989 and 2019, in case files my uncle assembled across 4 states, the same man appears in the background of 41 photographs, and in every single one he is looking directly at the person who would vanish within 9 days. I should explain the unit first because the boredom of it is the part I keep returning to. Storage facility off Halberd Road, Unit 219, a cinderblock corridor that smelled like dust and warm electrical insulation. The kind of place where the overhead lights buzz at a pitch you stop hearing after 10 minutes. My uncle, Daniel R. Voss, paid the rent in cash for 30 years. I'd met him maybe twice. The lease passed to me because there was no one else, and I drove out on a Tuesday expecting to spend an afternoon throwing away a dead man's hobby. The first thing that didn't fit was the labelling. Every folder was numbered, but the numbers weren't sequential. They skipped. Folder 40, then folder 42. I assumed 41 was misplaced. I found it 3 hours later, taped to the underside of the table, and the tab read only, "Do not photograph these together." What follows is reconstructed from his notes and the public record. Some of it I cannot verify. Some of it I have chosen not to. The cases share a shape. A person photographed at an ordinary event, a county fair in Edgemont, a parking lot outside the Tillison Avenue Clinic, a child's birthday in a backyard on Rose Street. Each subject reported in the days after the same minor complaint to someone. A co-worker, a pharmacist, a sister. The phrasing in my uncle's transcripts is nearly identical across decades. The man from the photo had started showing up, not threatening, just present, at the bus stop. Across the diner, 40 feet back, never closer. My uncle measured it. That's the detail that stopped me. In the margin of the Edgemont file, in his block handwriting, distance holds at 39 feet, 6 inches. Confirmed 3 sightings. He does not approach, he waits to be photographed. I want to be clear that I looked for the ordinary explanation. A relative who travelled, a stalker who happened to be caught on film. But the man does not age. In a photo dated June of 1991 and one dated October of 2017, he wears the same grey jacket, the same part in the same dark hair, the same expression that is not quite an expression. 26 years, the same crease in the same sleeve. My uncle wasn't cataloguing victims, he was tracking the man. The maps weren't of where people disappeared, they were predictions of where the man would surface next, and the dates were in the future. Some of those dates had passed, some hadn't. The last folder, the taped one, contained a single photograph my uncle had taken himself. A grocery store, fluorescent and ordinary, the dairy aisle. In the reflection of the cooler glass stands the man in the grey jacket, 39 feet behind the camera, looking into the lens. On the back, my uncle wrote the date he took it. Then, beneath it, a second line in shakier hand. He only appears once you have his picture. I have given him too many faces. If you're reading this, stop counting them. I didn't understand that line until I laid all the photographs out on the floor to sort them, every face turned upward, 41 of them looking at the ceiling, and realised I had arranged them into a grid, a pattern. I had, without meaning to, photographed them together with my phone to keep a record. Daniel R. Voss was reported missing on the 14th of August 2020 by the storage facility manager, who noted the rent had not been paid and the unit had not been opened in 11 months. His body was never recovered. The case remains open under file number 44021. The county investigator I spoke with was patient with me. He told me the photographs were interesting and asked me to leave them with his department. I declined. I'm not sure why. He told me, almost as an afterthought, that they'd run the grey-jacketed man through everything they had and gotten nothing. No match, no record. It's like he was only ever in the pictures, he said, and laughed, the way investigators laugh. I drove home and uploaded the grid to my files for safekeeping. The photograph I took in the dairy aisle was not in that unit. I took it last week. He was 39 feet behind me. He has not moved closer. Yet. Story 6. Marcus T. Delcourt spent 14 months listening to a dead man pause, and when he finally understood what filled those pauses, he requested that all 63 recordings be moved to a locked room he would no longer enter alone. He was a county historian, not a paranormal investigator, and he wants that distinction preserved. His office sat on the second floor of the Hulworth County Records Annex on Pell Street, the kind of building where the heating ticked all winter, and the carpet held the smell of old toner and instant coffee. His Tuesdays were the same for 19 years. Drive in at 8, sort intake, eat a sandwich at his desk while the radiator complained. The Brennan crate arrived in late autumn after the thermal image of the abandoned property had circulated online, and a distant relative donated the cassettes to the archive rather than keep them in a house where, she said, the family no longer slept well. The first crack was a small one. Delort was cataloguing recording number 31, a routine entry in which Harold Brennan describes the figure at the tree line and confirms the temperature reading of 51 degrees, when Harold stopped speaking mid-observation. The gap lasted long enough that Delort assumed the tape was damaged. He noted it on the intake form and moved on. Then he found another gap on tape 9, another on tape 44. Each silence sat in the middle of a sentence, not at the natural end. He timed them with a stopwatch app on his phone, the way a man checks something he expects to disprove. Every pause measured 11 seconds, not 10, not 12. 11 across recordings Harold made years apart on different machines in different seasons. The investigation, as Delort logged it in his own notebook, proceeded slowly because he was doing it on personal hours. He isolated each pause and stacked them in editing software, borrowed from the county media office. The first thing he noticed was an absence. During every 11-second window, the background of the recording emptied. The crickets that filled Harold's summer tapes cut out cleanly. The wind on the winter tapes stopped. Even the recorder's own electrical hiss shifted to a flatter, deader tone, as though the room had been wrapped in something. Delort's report to the county archivist, dated the 9th of February, notes only that ambient audio anomalies present in all 63 items warrant further review. He did not write what he had begun to suspect because he did not yet believe it. Over the following months he layered the pauses on top of one another, 63 silences breathing as one. At first there was nothing. Then a fragment surfaced. A single syllable in Harold's voice, faint and low, where Harold should have been, saying nothing at all. Delore found more, sentences cut into pieces and scattered across decades of recording, each piece occupying one 11-second gap, all of them spoken by the same man and waiting to be reassembled by someone patient enough to try. He reconstructed them in order. The fragments formed one sentence. I finally looked away. The line disturbed him for a reason that took him a week to articulate. Across all 63 tapes, Harold Brennan is meticulous. He describes the figure at the tree line in exhausting detail. He repeats the 51-degree reading like a prayer. He transcribes his conversations with the second voice, the one that appears on 14 of the recordings, and that no investigator has ever identified. Yet Harold never once describes what happened when he stopped looking. He narrates everything except the moment he turns his head. The story has a hole in it, precisely the shape of the thing it refuses to say. While cross-referencing the donation against county property records, Delort found a transfer manifest from the original site recovery. It listed 64 items removed from beneath the shed floor. The crate held 63. The 64th cassette had been logged separately into a sheriff's evidence archive under a case number that had long since closed. And after a polite and persistent request, Delort was permitted to hear it. The recording is 7 seconds long. Harold's voice, calm, almost relieved, says one thing. I blinked. The tape ends there, not stops. Ends the way a sentence ends when there is nothing left to say. Marcus Delort completed his catalogue and submitted it. He did not request a transfer or quit his position, though he stopped working evenings and began leaving the building before dark. When asked about the project by a regional newspaper, he declined to comment beyond confirming the recordings exist and are authentic. The locked room on the second floor holds all 64 tapes now, and the door is checked twice a week against a maintenance log, badge entries recorded by name and minute. There is one detail Delort added to the file in his own handwriting, near the end, after the official summary. During his final review session this past March, he left his recorder running in the empty room overnight by accident. The next morning, the file contained 11 hours of nothing, except for one stretch beginning at 3:41 in the morning, lasting exactly 11 seconds, where the hiss flattened and the room went quiet, and a voice that the lab later confirmed did not belong to Harold Brennan said, very softly, "He's listening now to Story 7. 41 folders were recovered from Daniel R. Voss's storage unit in the spring of 2019, but his own index, written in his own hand, accounts for 42. Investigators with the Hollis County Sheriff's Office assumed a folder had been lost during the seizure. They closed the matter in a single line on Incident Report 8814. I spent 3 years believing them, until I started digitizing the recovered material and noticed that Daniel referenced the missing file 46 separate times. Always by the same designation, always in the present tense, as though it were a thing he was still actively keeping. The storage facility sits off Brennan Road, Unit 212, a corrugated metal box in a row of identical corrugated metal boxes. It smells of motor oil and dust and the particular cold that concrete holds in October. I had been there before. The fluorescent tube over the door buzzes at a frequency that gives you a headache after about 10 minutes. I had always assumed the unit was empty of anything new. The first crack was the electrical panel. It sat flush against the back wall, except it didn't. Not quite. There was a gap of perhaps half an inch on the left side that the original inventory photographs, dated April 9th, 2019, did not show. The panel had been moved. By someone. After the seizure. Behind it was folder 42. The following account is reconstructed from that folder and from my own subsequent research. Some of it I cannot verify. Some of it I have stopped trying to. Unlike the other 41 files, folder 42 contains no victims, no photographs of the grey-jacketed man Daniel spent his life documenting, no newspaper clippings, no maps, no marked intersections. It contains measurements, thousands of them, recorded in pencil across decades, the earliest dated 1978 and the latest only weeks before Daniel's death. Every single entry records the same figure, 39 feet, 6 inches, page after page after page of the same distance, written until the graphite wore the paper thin. At some point, Daniel's notes make clear he stopped following the man. The man was not the pattern. The distance was. So Daniel began measuring the empty place where the man should have stood and recording it, and that place was always exactly 39 feet, 6 inches behind whoever was watching for him. Folded into the back was a list. Every name from the original 41 files. Every person connected to the disappearances Daniel had tracked. Margaret E. Calloway, Thomas P. Reyes, Dell Anders. Beside each name was a date, not the date they vanished. A second date, months or years later. I am a methodical person. I pulled what I could for each second date. Traffic camera stills off the county archive, tourist photographs from public albums, a church picnic, a ribbon cutting, a school fundraiser photographed by the Hollis County Register on a Tuesday in the autumn of 2008. They are all there. In the background of photographs taken months and years after they disappeared, the missing people stand. None of them look at the camera. None of them look distressed. Margaret Calloway, who vanished in 1991, stands at the edge of a parking lot in 2004, hands at her sides facing the photographer. I measured her position against the known dimensions of the marked spaces in the lot. She is 39 feet, 6 inches from the lens. They all are. Every one of them in every photograph occupies the same distance behind the person holding the camera. The final page of the folder breaks the pattern. There are no measurements on it. There is a grid, hand-drawn, 9 cells by 9, the precise arrangement Daniel warns against constructing in 3 separate files, the one configuration he underlines and circles and tells the reader never to complete. Beneath the grid, in handwriting that has lost all of its earlier discipline, that trembles in a way nothing else in his decades of records ever trembles, Daniel wrote one sentence. He never moved. They did. I sat with that for a long time. The honest investigator's instinct is to find the trick, the double exposure, the coincidence of crowd photography across a small county. I looked. I will tell you that I looked and that I am very good at looking, and that I have a folder of my own now considerably thinner than Daniel's, in which I have written down every reason this should not be true. It is not a comforting folder. Daniel R. Voss died of a heart attack in his apartment in February of 2019. He was 61. No one was with him. I had stopped working on this. I want that on the record. I had boxed the files and told myself I was finished. Last month my sister sent me a photograph from my niece's birthday. Everyone is laughing. I am in the centre, mid-sentence not looking at the lens. There is a figure at the back of the yard. I measured it against the fence line, which I built myself. The posts set at 8-foot intervals. 39 feet, 6 inches, story 8. On the night of April 19th, 2019, 5 men set up camp in the hollow pine basin of the Argent River Wilderness, and by the next morning only one of them remained, despite the fact that nothing at the campsite had been touched, moved, or disturbed in any way. The trip was nothing. 5 guys from the same machine shop in Delford taking a long weekend before spring overtime kicked in. They drove up in 2 trucks on a Friday afternoon, hauling a cooler of cheap beer, a propane stove that never worked right, and the kind of tents you buy from a hardware store and use twice. The man who survived is John R. Maddox, then 34, a welder with no criminal record and no reason anyone could find to lie. The first thing that went wrong was firewood. By 6 o'clock, the temperature had dropped to 39 degrees and the pile they'd gathered near camp was already gone. John volunteered. He told investigators he walked roughly a quarter-mile west, deeper than he meant to, because the closer deadfall was wet from a storm 2 days earlier. He spent about half an hour filling his arms with dry branches. He remembers the light going orange, then grey, then the rustling. He assumed it was a deer. The sound moved through the leaves to his left, paused, then started toward him. He called out twice. The noise got faster. He called a third time, and whatever it was broke into something close to a run, crashing through the brush in a straight line at him, and John did the only thing his body would let him do. He dropped the wood. He pulled the 2 hunting knives off his belt, drove them into the bark of a young pine, and climbed, jamming the blades in one above the other until he was 30 feet up in the new spring foliage. The man came out of the trees about a minute later. In his statement, John described him as ordinary. Average height, dark clothes, no mask, no weapon, nothing strange about him at all except that he made no sound and did not seem to breathe hard after running. The man stopped at the pile of dropped firewood. He looked at it for a long time. Then, slowly, without searching the lower branches first, he tilted his head straight up toward John, as though he already knew the exact height. John stayed in that tree for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He knows the number because he kept checking his watch to keep from panicking. The man stood at the base the entire time and never once looked away. At 9:51, the man simply walked back into the dark, unhurried. John climbed down around midnight and used his flashlight to find the trail back. The following account is reconstructed from his statement and the county incident report, file number AR-2271. The camp was intact. All 4 tents stood zipped or half open exactly as they'd been left. The fire had burned down to coals. Both trucks were parked where they should be. His friends' phones, wallets and boots were inside the tents. A beer sat open and still cold on a folding chair. Dennis A. Vacollery's reading glasses rested on his sleeping bag, folded. The men were gone. John searched for nearly 2 hours, screaming names into the trees before he drove to the ranger station on Route 11 and then to the sheriff's office in Delford. By 4 in the morning, a search was underway. Over the next 36 hours, they brought in dogs, 2 drones and 41 volunteers. They found nothing. No footprints leading out, no drag marks, no blood, no torn fabric, no broken branches beyond the ones John himself had snapped climbing. The dogs tracked each of the 4 missing men a short distance from their tents and then lost the scent in open ground in 4 different directions, as if all 4 had stepped off the planet mid-stride. The lead investigator, Sergeant Marlene K. Osterhaus, told the regional paper she had worked missing persons for 19 years and had never seen a scene so clean. "People leave marks," she said, "even when they don't want to. These men left nothing." "That's not how it works." John was questioned for 11 hours. He passed 2 polygraphs. There was no body, no motive, no physical evidence he had done anything but climb a tree. The case stalled. The trucks were released to the families. The tents went into an evidence locker, where they remain. The 4 men, Dennis A. Vollery, Samuel Teague, Brian Olari, and Christopher M. Dunn, were never found. In November of that year, 7 months after the trip, John received a plain white envelope at his apartment in Delford. No return address. The postmark was smudged past reading. Inside was a single photograph printed on cheap glossy paper, slightly overexposed by a flash. It shows all 4 of his friends seated around the campfire, the same fire John had seen burned to coals. They are smiling, all 4, directly into the lens. The metadata on the back, stamped by a developing machine, lists the capture time as 6:53 in the evening on April 19th. 1 minute after the dogs say they vanished. A 5th man stands behind them, slightly out of focus, looking at the camera. It is the man from beneath the tree. John gave the photograph to Sergeant Osterhaus. She had it examined. There were no fingerprints on it but his own, and 1 more set on the back that matched no one in any database. They were still warm when the lab logged them in. Story 9. On the morning of October 9th, 2019, a cell phone technician named Terence J. Holloway photographed his own son sleeping. He had never owned that camera. He had never taken that picture. It was waiting for him inside a stranger's phone. Holloway ran a small repair counter called Quick Fix Mobile on Denmark Avenue in a town I'll call Brackett, in a corner strip mall between a tax office and a closed nail salon, the kind of place that smelled like burnt solder and microwave noodles. He opened at 9, drank gas station coffee out of the same dented thermos, and on slow days he watched the parking lot through the window blinds. His employees described him as steady, unremarkable, the sort of man who organised his screwdrivers by length. The package was sitting on the welcome mat when he unlocked the door at 8:51. No label, no postage, a shoebox-sized cardboard container taped shut with a folded note rubber-banded to the top. The note read, in block handwriting, "Fix this and put it back outside." Inside was an older smartphone and $340 in worn 20s. He told a co-worker, Devin A. Reyes, that he assumed it was a prank. The phone had a blown charging capacitor, a 20-minute job. He fixed it. Then, before returning it, he tried to look inside. The passcode held for hours. Reyes said Holloway tried birthdays, area codes, repeating digits. As a joke, around closing, he typed his own son's birthday, March 22nd, 2012. The phone opened. The gallery held over 11,000 images. All of them were his son. Playgrounds, grocery aisles, the boy at a school recital, photographs taken at night through the bedroom window, the angle from somewhere in the backyard. The oldest timestamps dated back 6 years. Brackett Police opened case file 227-K. Detective Lorna E. Pratt later confirmed they could not identify the phone's owner, recover account data, or determine the source of a single image. The device contained no apps, no contacts, no carrier record. It was like the phone had never existed before that morning, she told investigators. The serial number matched a unit manufactured 19 months after the oldest photo was taken. 5 weeks later, a second package appeared. Same handwriting, same note. This time Holloway opened it with his son's birthday on the first try. Every photo was of him, at his counter, asleep in bed, driving north on Route 11, opening the first box, examining the second phone. The final image in the gallery showed Holloway standing in the shop, holding the device in both hands. He checked the timestamp. It had been taken 90 seconds earlier. Below it sat a video file recorded at the same moment. He played it. The footage showed the back of his own head, framed from roughly 4 feet behind him, the camera level with the crown of his skull. He turned around. The shop was empty. Pratt's team pulled the security footage from the ceiling camera, which recorded continuously at 15 frames per second. Between 4:11 and 4:16 in the afternoon, the timestamps on the box, no one entered the shop. No one left. Holloway stood alone the entire time. The recovered video shows a vantage point that, according to the report, does not correspond to any fixed surface in the room. 3 days later, Terence J. Holloway did not come home. His car was in the lot. His wallet and keys were on the counter. His thermos was still warm. 14 months on, a repair shop in another state logged a walk-in with no return address. A phone, a stack of cash, a note. The technician opened the gallery to test the screen. Thousands of photographs of a man named Holloway standing in a shop, looking at a phone, looking back. Story 10. In the 18 months since the last photograph of Caleb Mercer arrived, the number on his sign rose from 63 to 89, and Detective Raymond A. Voss is the only person who ever asked what the numbers were counting. Voss inherited the file in 2019, 4 years after Caleb disappeared from a gas station on Old Quarry Road. It was a desk case by then. Cold. Voss worked it between live ones, the way you keep a crossword in a drawer, and for a long time the photographs were just a cruelty he logged and filed under case number 417-K. They came once or twice a year, no return address, postmarked from different states. Caleb, always healthy, always older, always holding a handwritten number. The first thing that didn't fit was the math. Voss assumed the number counted days or weeks or photographs. None of it held. Between 2 images shot only 4 days apart, the number jumped 11. Then 7 months passed and it climbed by exactly 1. He built a spreadsheet. He gave up on the spreadsheet. He told a colleague it was probably nonsense meant to waste his time. And that colleague agreed, and Voss went home and could not sleep. So he stopped looking at Caleb. He printed every known photograph, 31 in total, and pinned them to the wall of an unused interview room on the second floor of the C.R. Onville County Annex. Then he studied the backgrounds, the walls behind the boy. A stained ceiling tile, brown and roughly triangular, appeared in 9 separate photographs taken across 6 years and 4 states. A dented aluminum air vent showed up in 14. In more than a dozen, low on the wall behind Caleb, sat a water stain shaped almost exactly like a splayed human hand. Voss measured them. Photo by photo, he marked the distance from each fixed object to the edge of Caleb's shoulder. The numbers got smaller. In the earliest image, the handprint stain sat 31 inches from the boy. In the most recent, 4 inches. The room was closing in around him. Voss began calling other agencies, other cold files, anyone with a long-term missing person and an anonymous photo problem. Most hung up, 4 did not. A woman in another state had been receiving pictures of her brother, gone since 2011, holding numbers of his own. Another family had photos of a missing daughter, different faces, different people, different states, same ceiling tile, same vent, same handprint stain on the wall. She told me she'd never noticed the background, Voss wrote in his notes after one call. Nobody ever looks at the background. You look at the face. You're trying to memorize a face you're afraid of forgetting. He laid all of it out, every family's photographs together, and the pattern was undeniable and made no sense at the same time. Strangers from across the country, none connected, none knowing each other, all photographed in what had to be the same room. A room that, measured against the bodies inside it, kept getting smaller. The newest photograph arrived on a Tuesday in March, postmarked from a town with a population of 906. Caleb is older now, mid-20s, healthy, a faint scar above one eyebrow that wasn't there before. He holds a sign that reads 101. The handprint stain sits directly beside his head, almost touching it. Behind him, for the first time in 7 years of photographs, there is another person in the room. Voss recognized the second man from a file he'd been mailed 3 weeks earlier, gone since 2014. A different state, a different family who never knew Caleb existed. The man stands close behind Caleb's shoulder, the same calm expression, holding his own small sign. It reads 1. Voss retired 4 months later. He cites stress. The interview room on the second floor of the annex was cleared and repainted, and the 31 photographs went back into the box, into the drawer, into the dark where cold cases sleep. He kept one thing, a copy of the latest image, in his kitchen, in a frame. Last week he called the agency back, the first contact in months, to report that the photograph in his frame had changed. Same room, same 2 men. But the handprint stain on the wall, the one he'd measured for years, the one that only ever moved closer, it is gone from the wall now. He says it has moved onto the glass on the inside, where his own fingers cannot reach it.